Damit kommen wir zu einer meiner Lieblingskategorien, den Mavericks. Mavericks, das sind für uns VorreiterInnen, AbenteurerInnen, Reisende mit dem Auge für das Spezielle. Menschen, die beeindrucken können und vor allen Dingen andere inspirieren können. Und eine steht dafür ganz besonders. Anna Zirner ist heute hier zu Gast. Hallo.
Hi.
Schön, dass du hier bist und schön, dass du dein neues Buch und deinen neuen Vortrag mitgebracht hast. Du bist den Colorado River runtergereist. Man kennt dich eigentlich von Alpensolo, wo du einmal von Ost nach West über die Alpen gewandert bist. Jetzt nicht in den Bergen, sondern zu Wasser. Wir freuen uns auf beeindruckende Bilder, auf beeindruckende Begegnungen und vor allen Dingen auf einen beeindruckenden Menschen. Viel Spaß mit Anna Zirner und vielleicht noch den Hinweis eben, du wirst gleich auf Englisch sprechen, ne?
Ja, genau.
Wieso?
Naja, ich bin selber halb Amerikanerin, mein Vater ist US-Amerikaner und ich habe halt diese ganze Reise auf Englisch gemacht und es macht irgendwie Sinn. Für mich passt es irgendwie gut und außerdem habe ich natürlich dadurch auch die Hoffnung, dass wir gerade mit diesem Format einfach auch noch mehr Leute erreichen können.
Alles klar, dann werde ich gleich nochmal mit einen Blick auf die Untertitel werfen. Viel Spaß.
Yeah, baby, yeah!
Entering into the flow of the river, I have lost what is known as time. At least the time that can be counted by ticking clocks and calendars. It faded from my days and nights, it was lifted off my heart and mind, and from my wrist. What revealed in its place is a liquid dimension, where the rays of the morning sun pour into the midday heat. The glowing dusk ripples into the moonlight, and the flicker of the stars splashes into that faint idea of dawn. That is Rivertime. Hello, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Anna Zirner. Those were the first lines from my book, Rivertime. I'm going to tell you about this journey today, where I traveled with the Colorado River all the way from its source to the Sea of Cortez. I hope that you can come with me on this journey, at least in this very digitally distanced way, and I hope that you can have a little mental vacation with me. In 2019, I followed the course of the Colorado River all the way from its birthplace up in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado to the Sea of Cortez in Mexico. I started in February and I arrived in May, so it was a trip of about 90 days. Now, as you can imagine, a trip like this was definitely something that had a pretty wide spectrum of temperatures. I started at about minus 20 degrees in February. It was that winter, 2019 was that winter where also over here in Germany, it was a very intense winter and with a lot of snow and a lot of also chaos, which also made me postpone my trip twice because I just couldn't get to the place where I was supposed to start, the headwaters of the Colorado River. 3 months later, when I got to Mexico, I arrived there and the heat was about 40 degrees Celsius. So I actually traveled a spectrum of about 60 degrees. That is to say, the spectrum of 60 degrees is kind of almost like an image for the variety of things that I encountered along the way. In case you're wondering how I traveled, I had different means of transportation. My main one was the Packraft that you can see in the middle here. It's an inflatable kayak. But especially in the beginning, I also traveled on foot because the river was still frozen. And then on the lakes, there are these huge reservoirs along the lifeline of the Colorado River. I had a sea kayak, and also in parts, I was just traveling with a regular kayak. The Colorado River is really like a kaleidoscope. And it's fascinating not only because there's all these vast and extremely varied landscapes, but also because in passing through it, you pass through a lot of conflict and you encounter a lot of different topics of our day, basically. But of course, what drew me there in the beginning was this landscape. which is absolutely incredible. And traveling along the river, I learned pretty soon that this river, it doesn't just feel like a river, it really feels like a being, like a living being. It has all these different kinds of characters. It has different moods, especially everybody who's been to the desert before knows this. The light is just incredible down there. Yeah, and then another thing that is just totally fascinating is, especially as a European, is the expanse. The expanse that is something that, as a European, we just don't know that kind of dimension of space. It's just, there's so much space that it's absolutely impossible to wrap a human head around that. And sometimes that really gave me headaches. It really made me feel overwhelmed, and I didn't know really how to deal with it. But there were also really surprises along the way, like landscapes that I just never imagined before, that I didn't know existed, and that were just way out of any ordinary thing one would imagine even as a tourist. But like I mentioned, there's also all this conflict along the way of the Colorado River, and it's really like a microcosm or like a mirror of today's societal problems. You see, for example, these massive clashes of nature and technology or human exploitation of that nature. In a very good way, for example, the Colorado River is a very hard worker. Every drop of the river is being used multiple times in its lifetime. But also in a bad way, because a lot of the landscape that surround the Colorado River is being exploited. There's a lot of natural riches, and the destruction of those places is something that leaves me very sad at times. But not just me, it's because what disappears in this destruction can just never be rebuilt. And it's not just nature, it's also cultural sites, it's historical sites, and definitely a lot of holy sites for a lot of native people who still live there. And then, of course, there's the problem that we know everywhere, and that's pollution, trash. In some places along the river, there was more trash than water in the river. And this river also crosses an international border, a very famous one at that, especially in the last administration of Donald Trump. It is the border between the US and Mexico, and a lot of the things that I experienced when I was paddling on the 40-kilometer stretch where the river is the border, where you have the US on one side and Mexico on the other side, are experiences that were just as impactful on me as all the beauty that I saw along the way. And then there is a topic that is on everybody's mind now, and that is visible the entire way on the Colorado River, and that's climate change. For several years now, the Colorado and the entire west of the United States and Mexico has been in a severe drought time, and it's led to water shortages all along the way, and it's really going to be a very big topic of the future, obviously, and in those areas where I was traveling, you can really see the effect of it already. Now, because we only have 30 minutes, I'm going to focus on this very famous stretch of the Colorado River that is famous for a reason, because it's grand. It's the Grand Canyon. I got to spend 21 days in the Grand Canyon, and I was very lucky because it's very difficult to get a permit to get through the Grand Canyon as a private person. So I was lucky because I got a job working as an assistant guide on a commercial river trip. And it wasn't just any trip, it was a very special trip because it was with dories. Dories are old wooden boats, traditional wooden boats. And it's really beautiful how those boats dance with the waves in the river. It takes the most skilled boatmen to travel with this boat. They are very, very sensitive when you try to steer them, but it really takes a lot of skill and a lot of, I would say, connection. And it was very inspiring to see those boats, and they really combine with the landscape in a beautiful way. The Grand Canyon is 464 kilometers long, and the average height of the walls that are next to it, left and right, is 1,600 meters. But it actually goes up to 2,400 meters. Now, if you imagine Zugspitze, the highest mountain of Germany, has 2,900 maybe, or 2,000, something like that. It's almost, when you're in the Grand Canyon, it's almost as if you had a Zugspitze left and right of you. Just to give you a slight idea of how extreme it feels, and this is an image from the very first day, it really feels like you're being pulled into the womb of the earth. And right on that first day, when we entered into this big gate, there was an appearance that made this moment even more special. As we entered, above the rim of the canyon, 3 California condors appeared. The California condor is one of the biggest flying animals. It has a wingspan of up to 3 meters. And it makes sense that for a lot of the native people in the area, it's a holy animal. There's a story that I really liked, and that's that the condor is actually the one who created the Grand Canyon. And it did that by circling up, just like it circled when we got there. It circles up higher and higher, and with every circle, it creates one layer of these endless layers of sediments that create the shape of the Grand Canyon. And in this picture, you can actually see the shape from the feathers as it was touching the wall. My first days in the Grand Canyon were not happy, which is probably weird, but I was just overwhelmed. It was too much for me. There's so many wonders and so many things that you want to see and grasp, and it was just too much for me because I wanted to document and I wanted to process and I wanted to write about it, and I just wanted everything at the same time, and realized that that's just not possible. It just doesn't work, and that really frustrated me. And I realized that there's something really strong about this place, is that there is water, liquid, in the desert, and this contrast has an extreme energy. I mean, it has the energy to bring out colors like this flower. And so this feeling of unrest really was with me for a few days, but I got to a place, and I remember this moment very clearly, where I was standing about 800 meters above the river. I was looking up, and left and right of me, the walls were still very high. And next to me were the Nankoweap granaries. Granaries are these really old, ancient pueblos of the Anasazi, the native people of a very, very long time ago. They are over 1,000 years old. And this notion of standing there and looking down at the river that was streaming west, like in a blue golden ribbon, looking up and having this time, this ancient time next to me while I was there in the present, was really like being at a crossing of time and place. And then I remembered this thing that I know about the Colorado River, and especially about the Grand Canyon, and that's that it can be seen from space. It's a pretty incredible thing to imagine. So I was standing there, and I was really like feeling the urge to wave up to the astronauts as they were flying by. I learned that what is so overwhelming and so beautiful about this nature is that it is a place where contrasts can exist in total unison next to each other. It's a place where ancient time exists right next to constant motion. It's a place where aesthetics and beauty exist in a way that can be secretive or even seclusive. And I mean, look at it. It's just also really sexy. It was great for me because I got to spend a lot of time, apart from all this hard work. It was hard work in a trip like this. But I got to spend a lot of time in my own boat by myself, and that was the time that really opened my mind, because I had solitude, I had silence, and I had this very direct connection with the river that I was traveling on. What became clear to me then is that the river is obviously entirely indifferent to my presence or our presence. It doesn't care that I'm there. And that can actually be very relaxing. And it was this that led to this kind of a notion of being able to let go. I mean, everybody talks about being in the flow, it's such a cliche thing to say. But I feel like I really got it. I really got it when I was there, because I was in the flow and I was finally realizing that it's about letting go, that it's not about wanting something or needing something. It's really to just be in the moment. Now, this also sounds like a cliche, I know, but what the beauty is about this type of being in the moment when you're traveling on a river is that it doesn't mean that you engulf or that you lose yourself. It's the opposite. You have to be super active. You have to be really active, because so many things are happening at the same time when you're paddling. And this combination of being in the flow and at the same time being very alert and very active and very focused and present is something that, it's like a high. It's really something that I haven't really achieved ever since I experienced it when I was on the river. Obviously, the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon is a beast sometimes. It's got rapids that I certainly couldn't paddle, where I was glad that I could go on the boats of my colleagues who were much more experienced. I have never paddled a boat before this trip, which might sound insane, but I actually learned along the way. And at the time when I entered the Grand Canyon, I had already been on the river for over a month. And it was really nice, though, that in the Grand Canyon, I finally learned much more about how to read the river and how to read the lines in the river. And I think a lot of that is due to this notion of space and time, the combination of feeling that, and this notion of being in the flow and being present. Contrasts that exist or can exist at the same time. It was incredibly inspiring, and I learned a lot from my colleagues, these dory boatmen and women, who are really the kings and queens of the Grand Canyon when it comes to a human way of traveling in the Grand Canyon, because they travel with these wooden boats. And they are the masters to me of this combination of extremes and this combination of seeming contradictions. And I learned a lot from them. I was a total rookie, like I said, on whitewater and kayaking, and I learned a lot from them. And so now I'm going to conclude with some images from some of my very, very best memories traveling down the Grand Canyon section of the Colorado River. It was great because my colleagues were really like trainers for me. They sat me down the night before, they explained to me what that rapid of the next day needed, and they made me repeat it back to them before I actually got into the wave. And that way I got to paddle some of the rapids that probably somebody with my skill set usually wouldn't be in. And the experience was definitely something that this video can probably describe better than my words. you really have to yell when you're in there because it's just so great. Yeah, so that's some images from the Grand Canyon. In case you would like to know more about this entire trip, of course, the stories don't fit in 30 minutes, but you're welcome to check out my book Rivertime.
Und wenn ihr mehr über Anna Zirner erfahren wollt, dann werde ich jetzt versuchen, noch ein bisschen was aus ihr rauszukitzeln. Vielen Dank, Anna, erstmal. Schöner Vortrag und vor allen Dingen Wahnsinnsbilder jetzt gerade auch nochmal. Echt krass. Aber was ich mich gefragt habe, ich meine, du bist als erstes, bist du Alpensolo, bist du durch die Alpen alleine gewandert, jetzt bist du den Colorado alleine runter. Nerven dich andere Menschen?
Nö, überhaupt nicht. Nee, ganz im Gegenteil. Ich bin eigentlich, ich wurde mal als Social Butterfly bezeichnet. Ich glaube, ganz so krass ist es nicht mehr, aber ich mag Menschen.
Und wieso dann die Trips alleine?
Ich komme halt auch gut mit mir selber klar. Also ich glaube, das widerspricht sich auch nicht unbedingt, beziehungsweise es ist eigentlich sogar ganz cool, wenn es beides einigermaßen funktioniert. Aber alleine, naja, es gibt schon so einen Aspekt, wo ich das Gefühl habe, man kann einfach ein bisschen intensiver erleben, wenn man Sachen alleine macht. Also weil man nicht sofort über Sachen redet oder weil man halt auch die Möglichkeit hat, jederzeit irgendwo stehen zu bleiben und einfach zu staunen. Und das hat man zu zweit auch, aber es ist anders, also oder in der Gruppe. Das ist anders. Ich würde nicht sagen, es ist besser oder schlechter, es ist einfach anders.
Und also ein ganz beeindruckendes Bild für mich war bei deinem Vortrag eben dieser Grand Canyon als so ein Schoß der Erde, in den man hineinfährt. Und gleichzeitig aber, wie du es beschrieben hast, du warst gar nicht glücklich in dem Moment, sondern du warst einfach nur überfordert. Und für mich war das eher so also aus dem Schoß der Erde rauskommen und diese, wie so ein Kind, die Wunder zu entdecken, die was das Hirn kurz ausschaltet, einmal rebootet und so weiter. Ja. Also wirklich, wirklich atemberaubend im wahrsten Sinne des Wortes. Diese Orte gibt es nicht mehr viel, oder?
Naja, also ich glaube, es ist halt spannend, dass es solche Orte in so einem Land wie den USA gibt. Das ist halt krass, weil das ja gleichzeitig so ein Megaland ist, wo irgendwie alles immer größer gemacht wird und irgendwie auch wahnsinnig viel künstlich gemacht wird und so. Und ich glaube, das ist schon auch was damit zu tun hat, dass der Kontrast, über den ich ja auch immer wieder spreche, dass der Kontrast halt so groß ist. Also dass man irgendwie auch sogar auf dem Trip durch den Grand Canyon irgendwie der Kontrast zwischen der Plastikverpackung und dem unglaublichen Aufwand, der betrieben wird, um so einen kommerziellen Trip zu machen, zu dem, was man da sieht, das sind Welten und die clashen aufeinander. Und ich glaube, das ist halt der Unterschied dazu, wenn man jetzt, weiß ich nicht, in Alaska oder in Kirgisistan oder sonst wo in die Wildnis losläuft, dann hat man so einen langsameren Eintritt irgendwie da rein. Und ich habe, glaube ich, einfach immer in diesem Kontrast gelebt. Und das ist das, was es auch sehr anstrengend macht.
Apropos Kontrast, du warst ja zu einer Zeit im Land, als man das Gefühl hatte, dass die Kontraste in den USA immer schärfer werden, dass sich das Land immer weiter aufspaltet. Inwieweit hast du auf dieser Reise auch einen Einblick in die Seele Amerikas gewonnen?
Ja, total. Also würde ich schon sagen, ich meine, ich bin ja selber halb Amerikanerin. Ich habe eine große Verbundenheit zu den Menschen dort, nicht zur Politik. Und ich habe schon einfach Sachen erlebt, wo man auch nochmal Toleranz auf eine ganz andere Art und Weise lernt. Ich habe 3 Stunden im Auto mit einem Mann verbracht, der davon überzeugt ist, dass die Erde eine Scheibe ist. Und der mir erklärt hat, warum. Und es ist eine ganz großartige Übung und das ist eben was man im Umgang mit so einem Land wie den USA gut machen kann, mal einfach das fahren zu lassen und das loszulassen, was man denkt, was richtig und falsch ist. Und
Hat er gute Argumente? Ja,
also mein Lieblingsargument ist, dass wenn man nach oben guckt und die Kondensstreifen sieht, ja, die sind immer in einer geraden Linie.
Ja, das stimmt auch. Das ist mir auch schon aufgefallen.
Die sind ja auch nicht gebogen.
Ja,
also
eben.
oder?
Nein, aber vielleicht weg von der Gestalt, hin zur Natur und dann wieder zu den Menschen, weil eben diese Kontraste, das fand ich auch so besonders, dass die nicht nur nebeneinander stehen können, nicht nur koexistieren können, sondern sich auch gegenseitig ergänzen können und eben atemberaubende Farben, atemberaubende Eindrücke und Bilder kreieren. Und da dann auch nochmal die Frage an dich, inwieweit kann man das vielleicht auch auf die Gesellschaft übertragen?
Ja, ich glaube, das ist eben ganz schön auf die Gesellschaft zu übertragen, weil die USA, und das war auch einer der Gründe, warum ich diese Reise gemacht habe, weil mich das wahnsinnig nervt, gerade in Deutschland oder in Europa, dass man, und natürlich besonders zu Trump-Zeiten auch zu Recht, aber man hat halt immer so auf die Amerikaner geschimpft. Und ich kenne dieses Land einfach ein bisschen besser und ich glaube, jeder, der dieses Land ein bisschen besser kennt, würde mir da zustimmen, dass das halt nicht so einfach also es sind halt Extreme. Es sind Extreme zwischen Intelligenz und extrem hoher Bildung und Technologisierung und irgendwie Regionen, wo man denkt, da hat die Zivilisation noch nie vorbeigeschaut, im Guten wie im Schlechten so. Und ich glaube, das ist einfach was, wo ich einfach jeden auch einlade, das irgendwie so im Hinterkopf zu halten, wenn man darüber schimpft, dass wie die Amis sind. So.
Und du hast ja auch ein anderer Kontrast, den du angesprochen hast, ist einerseits die Schönheit der Natur, andererseits der Müll und vor allen Dingen auch der Klimawandel, der sich immer mehr bemerkbar macht. Inwieweit kann man denn heutzutage noch verreisen? Weil das ist ja auch ein Kontrast, den du gemacht hast. Du bist hingefahren, bist da sehr nachhaltig gereist, hast aber das Flugzeug benutzt, um hinzukommen.
Also das ist ein Riesenkontrast und ich finde, das ist auch was, worüber man ganz dringend immer sprechen sollte, anstatt so zu tun, also gerade ich jetzt als jemand, die auch so ein bisschen für Nachhaltigkeit, glaube ich, steht, dass das ein Konflikt ist. Und für mich ist das Ausmaß an Impact mit CO2, was man bei so einer Flugreise hinterlässt, ist mir tatsächlich bei der Reise zum ersten Mal so richtig bewusst geworden, weil ich quasi mein Kontingent für über 2 Jahre aufgebraucht habe mit Hin- und Rückflug. Meine Konsequenz daraus war, dass ich seitdem nicht mehr fliege. Ich habe auch nicht vor, wieder zu fliegen, um so ein bisschen das aufzuarbeiten vielleicht. Das muss jeder selber wissen, wie man damit umgeht, aber man muss damit umgehen.